What's going on? What's happening? Peace and power and elevation be to all you beautiful folks out there. It's your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. So today's topic is going to be about Amiri Baraka. Amiri Baraka was pretty known in the 70s and the 60s. He was an African American writer and poet. So what is very interesting is that this man had a lot of controversy around him. You know, a lot of things that he done said. Excuse me. A lot of things that he done, just a lot of stuff that he wrote about and he spoke about. So he had a lot of names added on to him on the list of those who were very controversial. So I was reading this book right here. It's called Amiri Baraka, The Politics and Art of a Black Intellectual. Okay. So now, so in this book, it mentioned about how he went to the HBCU, Howard University, and he had an issue with Howard University. He didn't like it because he felt like those people want to pretty much, they want to pretty much be like the bourgeoisie. They want to be black and bougie. They didn't want to like progress African American community or uplift African people, but be on the bourgeoisie level. To try to pretty much earn that status as white folks. So that's what he felt like, and he ended up leaving the school. He joined the military and all of that. So I'm gonna get into that information, but make sure you guys like and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and make sure you let the people know. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with the information on Amiri Baraka. Who was he in the beginning? All right, so right here, that's a picture of him. Now, according to the source online, of course, from Wikipedia, it says that he was previously known as Leroy Jones. His real name was Everett Leroy Jones, and he was an African American writer of poetry, drama, fiction, essays, and music criticism. Right, he was the author of numerous books of poetry and taught at several universities, including the University of Buffalo and Stony Brook University. He received the Penn/Beyond Margins Award in 2008 for Tales of Out. For Tales of the Out and the Gone. Baraka plays and poetry and essays have been described by scholars as constituting defining text for African American culture. All right. So, um, so it goes on to talk about Baraka's poetry and writing have attracted both high praise and condemnation in the African American community. Some compare Baraka to James Baldwin and recognize him as one of the most respected and most widely published black writers of his generation. Though some have said his work is an expression of violence, misogyny, and homophobia, Baraka's brief tenure as poet laureate of New Jersey involved controversy over a reading of his poem "Somebody Blew Up America," which resulted in accusations of anti-Semitism and negative attention from critics and politicians. Now, before I go there, right? See, I love how people throw up the term anti-Semitism. I love that. It's like even if you say something that deals with historical events about Jews, right, or you holding Jews accountable for their roles and their action in part of racism, the first thing they holler out is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism. Okay? It's like you can't have no opposing views about nothing, right? It's very funny. So I want to give the shout out to the chat. Shout out to Big Cree Money. Shout out to TK. Shout out to Vinyasa. Shout out to Centavo. What's going on? Shout out to y'all. Thank y'all for coming through. But yeah, they love to throw that term out. I mean, so anytime you consider being anti-Semitic, that's pretty much your income. That's pretty much taking away your ability to be able to progress. I mean, we see the situation with Kanye West, right? We see the situation with Kanye West when he said that blacks were the original Jews and that he was jealous of the Jewish people. And what happened? They took away his power. And he thought Adidas wasn't going to take it away. But ironically, Adidas was never founded by the Jewish people. It was founded by those who was in the Nazi party. Uh, Both Puma and Adidas was founded by two brothers that are part of the Nazi party. But that's very interesting. However, they took away his rights. They pretty much cut ties with him, right? But But yeah, that word anti-Semitism is tossed around, and another one that's tossed around so much is homophobia. Don't you have your opposing views about homosexuality, or don't say that you disagree about somebody. You know what I'm saying? As far as like where they position is at, because you're considered as being homophobic because you don't deal with the popular culture, right? You don't deal with popular opinions. But anyways, let's continue on. So here's his biographical information. So he was born in Newark, New Jersey, where he attended Warringer High School. His father, Court Leroy Jones, worked as a postal supervisor and lift operator. His mother, Anna Lowe's, was a social worker. Jazz was something Baraka became interested in as a kid. He wanted to be just like Miles Davis. I wanted to look like that too. That green shirt and rolled up sleeves on milestones, always wanted to look like that and be able to play on green Dolphin Street or autumn leaves. The gorgeous, chilling, sweet sound. That's the music you wanted play when you was coming into a joint or just looking up the sky with your baby by your side. The mixture of America and them changes, them blues African magic chants. The influence of jazz can be seen throughout his work later in life. All right. So but according to the book that I have here, it mentions that Baraka came from a lower middle class family, right, which is like the upper worker class family. So he came from that environment. So let's go to the book real fast. All right. Hmm. All right. So right here in this book, according to this book here, it says that the former Leroy Jones was born Everett Leroy Jones in Newark, New Jersey, on October 2nd, 1934. Of Collier Leroy Jones, a postal supervisor, and Ann Lewis Russ Jones, a social worker. So Leroy was raised in a stable lower middle class, upper working class black family. Even though his family aspired to the bourgeoisie, Jones was fundamentally shaped throughout his early years by a rather typical American lower middle class socialization with one qualification. He was born and raised black in a significantly racist society. In describing his religious upbringing, Jones provided a glimpse of the black lower middle class of the black lower middle class world of his youth. He says, my own church in Newark, New Jersey a Baptist church has almost no resemblance to the older traditional Negro Christian churches. The music, for instance, is usually limited to the less emotional white church music, and the choir usually sang Bach or Handel during Christmas and Easter. In response to some of its older country members, the church, which was headed by a minister who is the most respected Negro in Newark, has to import gospel groups or singers have a more traditional Negro church sound. So it was basically saying how he grew up. Yeah, he grew up in a middle class family, but his parents wanted to be very bougie. They wanted to be the uppity type Negroes. But in his eyes, he saw it differently. He's like, look, I'm a black man born into America, and I'm born into a racist society. Why can't people not get that? So he wasn't too fascinated about his upbringing, basically. So as we could see here that he was inspired by Miles Davis. He was into the blues and the jazz and all. Blues and jazz was very popular back in those days. Okay, that was the most popular genre that black people listened to. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. And it says he won scholarship to Ruger University in 1951, but transferred in 1952 to Howard University. His classes, philosophy and religious studies, helped lay a foundation for his later writings. He subsequently studied at Columbia University and the New School without taking a degree. So in 1954, he joined the United States Air Force as a gunner, reaching the rank of sergeant. This was a decision he would come to regret. He once explained, I found out what it was like to be under the direct jurisdiction of people who hated black people. I have never known that directly. This experience was yet that influenced Baraka's later work. His commanding officer received an anonymous letter accusing Baraka of being a communist. Now let's talk about that. See, back in the day, if you was a communist, right, you was considered as the op, and you had to be on the watch. You had to be on the watch. So you could not sit here and say, "Hey, I'm a communist," while you in America, because especially if you was black, the government was gonna keep tabs on you. Why you think? Why do you think that they was watching the Black Panther parties and all the other black organizations very closely? Because they wanted to see if they was connected with the Communist Party, which a lot of them were inspired by communism, and that's gonna be a whole nother subject in itself. But a lot of them were inspired by communism. They were inspired. They found it a magnificent. As far as the ideology is concerned, they thought it fit. They thought the philosophy fitted what black people were looking for, right? And so, with that being the case, with that being the case, the government kept a close tab on them and kept watching their every move to see, okay, what is these black folks over here doing? They even had infiltrators to watch what was going on. But let's go ahead and continue. Let's see what else we can find here. This led to the discovery of Soviet writings in Baraka's possession, his reassignment to guardian duty, and subsequently a dishonorable discharge for violation of his oath of duty. He later described his experience in the military as racist, degrading, and intellectually paralyzing. While he was stationed in Puerto Rico, he worked at the base library, which allowed him able reading time, and it was here that, inspired by beat poets back in the mainland U.S., he began to write poetry. All right, so let me read to you what he had to say about Howard University. Okay, let me read to you what he said about Howard University. Right. So going down to here, it says, after graduating from high school, Jones enrolled in the Newark branch of Whitaker University. He once again found himself in a predominantly white environment. In explaining his year-long stay at Whitaker's, one biographer wrote, the effort to prove himself in an essentially mediocre situation and the experience of always being an outsider in any school social activities made him transfer to Howard University. Howard University proved critical to the development of Baraka's ethnically marginal identity, for at Howard he was exposed to the world of Negro elite, the authentic black bourgeoisie. Long considered the capstone of Negro education, Howard University was the national centerpiece for education of the black bourgeoisie. Founded in 1866 by General Oliver Howard, head of Freedmen's Bureau, to educate the former slaves, Howard University was and continued to be the best funded, predominantly black center of higher education because of its direct subsidies from the federal government. By the early 20th century, Howard had become specifically endowed with the mission of educating the black professional class. Through this university came a disproportionate share of the country's black lawyers, doctors, dentists, ministers, teachers, social workers, and scholars. Except for the sporadic intellectual exchanges in classes taught by Sterling Brown, Nathan Scott, and E. Franklin Frazier, Jones strongly disliked Howard. He considered it anti-intellectual. Howard students appeared to be more interested in acquiring the proper black bourgeoisie was it Wettington then in obtaining a serious education. Jones was disgusted by what he thought to be Howard's educational philosophy. The Howard thing let me understand the Negro sickness. They teach you to pretend to be white. So Theodore Huston, author of From Leroy Jones to Amiri Baraka, mentions Jones' involvement in a watermelon episode that has almost become a legend. Though somewhat imaginary, the episode captured Jones' disenchantment with Howard and more precisely his delusionment with the black middle class. As the story goes, Jones and a buddy bought a watermelon and sat down to eat it on a bench in front of one of the college halls. Shortly thereafter, his buddy left to attend a class. Now sitting alone, Jones was approached by a university administrator, the dean of men, who asked Jones just what he thought he was doing sitting outside a campus building eating watermelon. Jones claimed to have nonchalantly answered that he was simply eating the melon, whereupon the insulted dean ordered Jones to discard it. Rather mischievously, Jones replied that he could chuck only his half of the melon, for the other half belonged to his friend. According to Jones, the agitated dean's response was shocking. Do you realize that you're sitting right in front of the highway where white people can see you? Do you realize that this school is the capstone of Negro higher education? Do you realize that you are compromising the Negroes? So let me talk about that for a few minutes. I believe him when he said that Howard University was focused more on fashion and black elite versus actually focusing on education. I believe him because there has been stories about those who done went to Howard, including Yvette Carnell. If you guys know her from Breaking Brown, she even mentioned how Howard University put so much emphasis on fashion and being bourgeoisie than actually focusing on the African American education and trying to make sure African American get to where they need to be. But we see that Howard is going through some crisis right now. But yeah, still people trying to focus on putting on an image, trying to make sure that they the top notch number one HBCUs. So I can only imagine what he had gone through, especially when the dean pretty much said you eating watermelon on the campus at a university that is very known to bring by Negro education. In other words, what he was saying to him is that you making us look bad as black people. You making us look bad by eating that damn watermelon. You need to put that watermelon down. So what did Amiri Baraka do? He was like, look, I'm about to get the hell up out of here. Because they doing too damn much. The man just simply went and bought some watermelon. He was just eating. He wasn't trying to cause no problem. But if we know about the historical story behind black people and watermelon, it deals with the stereotype about us being pretty much hyenas and not having any type of table manners and shit like that. So I guess with Howard, they want to try to clean up the image, like, you know, we're not like that. We're not what you think it is. So they try to pretend to reach the standards of white people and trying to by integrating themselves versus really focusing on bringing some type of class or some type of structure for the African American community. They too busy trying to live up to the expectation of white folks to impress them. So that's why the term black bourgeoisie come into existence, because that's what it is. That's what it was back then, and that's what it is now. So yeah, so he pretty much rebelled and said, you know what, it's time for me to go. Why am I still here? I don't need to be at this university because these folks want to be so elite. They want to be more so trying to live up to the standard of their oppressor. Why am I here? I don't need to be at this school. So yeah, TK put wild black poet. Yes, he was. He was a wild black poet. He was very wild. All right, so anyways, now, so it goes on to say the same year he moved to Greenwich Village, working initially in a warehouse of music records. His interest in jazz evolved during this period. It was also during this time that he came in contact with the avant-garde Black Mountain poets and New York school poets. In 1958, he married Hetty Cohen, and with whom he had two daughters, Kelly Jones and Lisa Jones. He and Hetty founded Totem Press, which published such beat poets as Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg. In cooperation with Corinne Totem, published books by Leroy Jones and Diane D. Prima, Ron Winson, and Michael McClure, just to name a few. All right, so it's so many of them. And they also jointly founded a quarterly literary magazine, Yugen, which ran for 8 issues. Through a party that Baraka organized, Ginsberg was introduced to Langston Hughes while Ornette Coleman played saxophone. All right. So basically his first wife was a Jewish woman. Okay, she was of a Jewish background. Now someone had made a statement that all his baby mamas were white, and that's not true. Maybe about 2 of them were white, and one of them happened to be a black woman. Okay, we'll get to that. But yeah, he happened to marry a Jewish woman, and the marriage didn't last for very long because once he started listening to Malcolm X and his speeches, he no longer wanted to be with her anymore. So he just left and moved on and got with somebody else. But he happened got with another white woman. Then he left that white woman to being with a black woman that he was married to, and he had children with her. So he had children with all these different women. Okay. So yeah, you might think, well, that's very ironic, by him being very revolutionary and very outspoken, he was married to a Jewish woman. Yeah, it is. But a lot of them did that. A lot of them married outside their own race. You know what I'm saying? Not everybody who spoke about Black Revolution, who was dealing with Black Power, was married to those within their own culture or in their own ethnic group. They married outside. That's very common, right? I mean, but then there's also a saying goes like this: you can't talk black and sleep white. I mean, that's kind of true. I agree with that. I mean, you can't talk black and sleep white. I mean, because if you talk about the liberation of black people and you talk about building a black community, of being that bringing about the foundation of the black community, one of those foundations is the relationship between black men and black women. That's the foundation. That's the primary foundation. So if you look at the relationship between a black man and a black woman, right? And once you bridge those gaps together, then you continue to have a nation build. But if you got this group over here, this person over here, or multiple people marrying outside their own race, then how you really bring about progression? You know what I'm saying? Not saying that those who are biracial are not African descent, because they are. Of course, they are African descent. Okay, as a matter of fact, if they was to take a DNA test, I guarantee most of them will find out they got more African bloodline than they have European bloodline. I mean, because that's how DNA works. But anyways, yeah, a lot of them did marry outside their own culture. They married outside their own race. They had relationships. And then there was those who didn't. There was those who really stuck to being with the people they came up with. They stuck with being with their ethnic group. You know what I'm saying? They really stuck to it and they were very committed that way. But it was others who married outside their own race. And that's what they did. All right. Um, so Baraka also worked as editor and critic for the literary and arts journal Coker with Diane D. Prima. He edited the first 25 issues of their small magazine, The Floating Bear. In October 1961, the U.S. Postal Service seized the Floating Bear number 9. The FBI charged them for obscenity over William Burroughs' piece, Roosevelt, after the inauguration. In the autumn of 1961, he co-founded the New York Poets Theater with D. Prima. The choreographer Fred Herkel and James Warning, and the actor Alan S. Marlowe. He had an extramarital affair with Di Primo for several years. Their daughter, Dominique Di Primo, was born in June of 1962. Okay, so Baraka visited Cuba in July of 1960 with a Fair Play for Cuba Committee delegation and reported his impression in his essay, Cuba Libre. There he encountered openly rebellious artists who declared him to be a cowardly bougie individuals or individualist, more focused on building his reputation than trying to help those who were enduring oppression. This encounter led to a dramatic change in his writing and goals, caused him to become empathetic about supporting black nationalism. So in 1961, Baraka co-authored a declaration of conscience in support of Fidel Castro regime. Baraka also was a member of the Umbra Poets Workshop of emerging black nationalist writer Ishmael Reed and Lorenzo Thomas, among others, on the Lower East Side. His first books of poems, preface a 20-volume suicide note, was published in 1961. Baraka's article, The Myth of a Negro Literature, 1962, stated that a Negro literature to be a legitimate product of the Negro experience in America must get at that experience in exactly the term America has proposed for in its most ruthless identity. He also stated that in the same work, that as an element of American culture, the Negro was entirely misunderstood by Americans. The reason for this misunderstanding and for the lack of black literature of merit was, according to Jones, in most cases, the Negroes who found themselves in a position to pursue some art, especially the art of literature, have been members of the Negro middle class, a group that has always gone out of its way to cultivate any mediocrity as long as that mediocrity was guaranteed to prove to America and recently to the world at large that they were not really who they were, Negroes. So it says, as long as black writers were obsessed with being an accepted middle class, Baraka wrote, they would never be able to speak their mind and that they would always lead to failure. Baraka felt that America only made room for white of uppercasters, not black ones. Well, what do I agree with that? I mean, he's right, because if black people focus more on trying to be bougie and trying to be in the middle class, they won't really have a voice. I mean, we see the situation with Kanye, right? Okay. We see with the situation with Kanye West. I mean, because he was too busy trying to live up to the image of what everybody wanted him to be, right? But when he started speaking out against the music industry and he started speaking on other things that were going on, he started to really make serious controversy and he started to lose. So here it is, a man that then went from being a billionaire, right, to becoming a multimillionaire. He done went from being a billionaire to a multimillionaire. What that basically say? That means his power was taken as far as financially speaking. They took away all of that. They took away his endorsement. So I'm saying this because Kanye himself came from a middle class family. Okay, his mother was a professor at Morehouse College, I believe. She was a professor. Then she ended up moving to Chicago when he was a little boy. When he was about maybe 3 years old, and he was raised in Chicago. So he came from that background. And then when he got into the industry, right, he started making all these success, having all these accolades, etc. And but when his mom passed, it pretty much made him feel some kind of way. And he just being very vocal and outspoken. Even when his mother was alive, he was still vocal and outspoken. Now we might wonder, well, what the hell he was thinking being with Kim Kardashian. We don't know what the hell he was thinking about that, but he started to see what she was really about. You know what I'm saying? What she was really worth. So I mean, he had kids with the woman, but he really seen what she was really about. So the point that I'm making is somebody that's in Kanye's position or anybody else's position in that higher status, they don't really have a voice to say much, right? Because their main thing is you are black and you are a celebrity or you are in this prestigious level and you live in this type of community, in this type of environment, you really don't have a voice to say anything. If you say something, it's going to be used against you. You know what I mean? So, and that's what, so yeah, Amiri Baraka pretty much has a point on that. Now, so now let's see what he talks about in the book. So in this book right here, it was actually written by Gerald Gafio Watt. That's who it's written by. But let's see about this whole thing dealing with black nationalism. Okay. So as y'all can see, I'm going back and forth from Wikipedia and to this book. All right. So let's go down to where it talks about black nationalism. All right. All right. So right here, this is what it became very interesting to me. So right here in this book, it says that Jones had been hurling threats and investigative at whites long before it became the rigor for Black Power advocates. He had become particularly entranced by the idea of freeing white Americans. It was as if he had deliberately chosen to be Jimmy Baldwin's antithesis, whereas Baldwin was writing about the suffering of black folks and the subversion of white humanity and white supremacy. Baraka spoke of killing whites. He was not concerned about their moral redemption. His unstated aspiration was to rhetorically disseminate whites in a manner comparable to their historical persecution of blacks. Then it goes on to say Jones' maniacal desire to frame whites reached a peak with the publication of American Sexual Reference Black Male. Republished and widely read in home, the essay originally appeared in Cavalier magazine in January 1966. The cover of the magazine reads, Leroy Jones tells it like he sees it. The white man is obsolete. Accompanying the article is a photograph of Jones casually posed in a sport coat, tie, and tennis shoes. He holds the proverbial writing cigarette in his hand. This relaxed photo was placed against his bombshell essay and irony not loose on the magazine editors who wrote below the publishing photo. This pleasant, affable young man has a message for you. Jones' decision to write this vitriolic article in a predominantly white magazine revealed the parasitic status of those victim status blacks who were locked in a quest for white recognition by means of fear. The smug picture of Jones accompanying the article does not indicate his awareness of his dependence on white. And if anything, Jones looks as though he actually believes that he has written something quite provocative and radical. This essay reveals Jones' willingness to use vicious and vulgar sexism and sickening racist depiction of blacks in order to terrify whites. He argued that because of their history in America, black men were more in touch with their sexuality than white men were, and that recognition of this black male predicament had led to white women's sexual desire for black men. It says the reason the white woman was supposed to be intrigued by the black man was because he was basic and elemental emotionally, which is true for the non-brainwashed black simply because there is no reason he should be. the black man is more natural than the white simply because he has fewer things between him and reality, fewer wrappings, fewer artificial rules, therefore wilder, harder, and almost insatiable in his love making. So, so that makes me wonder, well, if that's the reason why he got with a white woman. Is that the reason why he had a relationship with white women, with the Jewish wife that he had and the love affair he had? That's what made me wonder because he had this idea that white women had a fetish for black men sexually. And we all know what that fetish is. I don't think I need to go any further of how white women have a fetish for black men. I don't think I need to go there. Y'all know. If you don't know, you better figure it out. But anyways, um, so he felt that, well, white women have a fetish for black men, and black men seem to be more dominant in his sexual nature. And I guess he called himself trying to intimidate white folks, which at the end it kind of backfired on him because he started sounding crazy to him. Like, what's wrong with this dude? Like, he's weird. So let's see. Norman Richmond, what's up? How you doing, bro? All right, but let's go ahead and let's continue on. I'm gonna get back to that book. All right. So, going on to say 1963, Baraka published Blues People, Negro Music in White America, his account of the development of black music from slavery to contemporary jazz. When the work was reissued in 1999, Baraka wrote in the introduction that he wished to show that music was a score that actually expressed creative orchestration, reflection of Afro-American life, that the music was explained the history as the history was explained the music, and that both were expression of and reflection of the people. He argued that though the slaves had brought their musical tradition from Africa, the blues were an expression of what black people became in America. The way I have come to think about it, blues could not exist if the African captives had not become American captives. Let's read that again. Let's highlight that. The way I have come to think about it, blues could not exist if their African captives had not become American captives. So Baraka wrote an acclaimed controversial play titled Dutchman, in which a white woman accosts a black man on the New York City subway. The play premiered in 1964 and received the Obie Award for Best American Play in the same year. A film on the play, directed by Anthony Harvey, was released in 1967. The play has been revived several times, including a 2013 production staged in the Russian and Turkish bathhouse in the East Village, Manhattan. All right. Okay, so let's start right there. Now, when he spoke about music, right? Let's get into the music for a moment. All the genre, the black genre that we know, from blues, gospel, folk, jazz, hip hop, R&B, that started in the heart. Those started in the heart of the ghettos, not in the middle class community, not in the upper class community, but in the heart of the ghetto, right? Or in the heart of the poorest environment that black people were in. Okay? Now today we see that people that don't look anything like us control those genres on a commercial level. They profiting from that. Whereas those same black people, right, that come from those communities are not reaping those benefits. And the reason why these genres came about is because it was a way for black people to express themselves, express how they felt, to use their creativity. But before that, black people were able to use it as a way to bring about communication, to bring about signal, right? To let them know that if the slave master was coming, right? or to find a way to get off the plantation and uh, fight for their freedom. Okay, so folk music was used as a way for black folks on plantations to communicate with each other, and so they could come up with some form of strategy. They spoke in codes of how to get off the plantation and where to go. So yes, but then the origin goes back to the originality, which is the African origin. All right, we find a lot of African roots in these genres. We find a lot of African roots in them. So when people sit back and argue about, well, where did hip hop come from? Who started hip hop? Well, you got to go to the origin. You got to go to the root of it. Then once you go to the root of it, then you see where it really came from. Now I seen something on Facebook, and I want to bring this up real fast before I continue. One of the brothers on Facebook posted that hip hop came from the South. And I agree, rightfully so. Because if you think about all the techniques, the sound, like folk music, the jazz element, the blues, and all of that that is blended in with hip hop, that was the Southerners. Those were the Southerner people using their creativity. So I could see where he come from when he say hip hop origin came from the South because of all those different genres blended in to make the sound what it is. And he has a point, has a great argument. This individual has a great argument on that. But a lot of people disagree because they say, well, it came from New York, this, that, and the other. Yeah, it came from New York, but when we look at the origin in its sound, that comes from the South. Because the Southern people brought the musical tradition to New York. They brought their own type of sound, their own type of music. They incorporate all of that. Okay? But I just want to bring that into the conversation. So now let's continue on. So it says after the assassination of Malcolm X in 1965, Baraka changed his name from Leroy Jones to Amiri Baraka. At the time, he also left his wife and their two children and moved to Harlem, where he founded the Black Arts Repertory and Theater Schools. Since the Black Arts movement created a new visual representation of art. However, the Black Art Repertory Theater School remained open for less than a year. In its short time, Barks attracted many well-known artists, including Sonia Sanchez, Sam Ra, and Albert Ayer. The Black Arts Repertory Theater School's closure prompted conversation with many other black artists who wanted to create similar institutions. Consequently, there was a surge in the establishment of these institutions in many places across the United States. The December of 1965, Baraka moved back to Newark after allegations surfaced that he was using federal anti-poverty welfare funds for his theater. So Baraka became a leading advocate and theorist for the burgeoning black art during this time. Now a black cultural nationalist, he broke away from the predominantly white beats and became critical of the pacifist and integrationist civil rights movement. His revolutionary poetry became more controversial. A poem such as Black Art, according to Winter Solar of Harvard University, expressed Baraka's need to commit violence required to establish a black world. So Baraka used onomatopoeia in black art to express that need for violence. Bruh, you already know, I ain't even gonna go there. So most specifically, lines in black art such as Let There Be No Love poems written until love can exist freely and cleanly, juxtaposed with We Want a Black poem in a black world, demonstrate Baraka's cry for political justice during a time when racial injustice was rampant despite the civil rights movement. Okay. So now let's skip down. Black art quickly became the major poetic manifesto of the black arts literary movement, and in it, Jones declaimed, "We want poems that kill," which coincide with the rise of armed self-defense and slogans such as "Arm yourself or harm yourself" that promoted confrontation with the white power structure rather than use poetry as an escapist mechanism. Baraka saw poetry as a weapon of action. All right. So it says in April 1965, Baraka's A Poems for Black Hearts was published as a direct response to Malcolm's X assassination and further exemplified the poet's uses of poetry to generate anger and endorse rage against oppression. Like many of his poems, it shows no remorse in its use of raw emotion to convey its message. It was published in September issue of Negro Digest and was one of the first responses to Malcolm X's death to be exposed to the public. The poem is direct particularly at black men and scoldly labels them faggots in order to challenge them to act and continue the fallen activist fight against the white establishment. So Baraka also promoted theater as a training for the real revolution yet to come, with the arts of being a way to forecast the future as he saw it. The revolutionary theater Baraka wrote, "We will scream and cry murder, run through the streets in agony, if it means some soul will be moved." In opposition to the peaceful protest inspired by Martin Luther King Jr., Baraka believed that a physical uprising must follow the literary one. So Baraka's decision to leave Greenwich Village in 1965 was an outgrowth of his response to the debate about the future of black liberation. So as TK mentioned, he was a wild poet. Yes, he was. And there was a lot of them that was like him. So he had a rebellious spirit at that time period. He said, look, instead of sitting up here trying to talk about peace and bring love and unity, we need to bring about rebellious attitude. We need to have that mindset to where we can fight back and fight against the power structure. So he was a very rebellious man. He was. And, Malcolm was too. Malcolm was about self-defense by any means necessary. And then what a lot of people don't know is during the time when Martin Luther King had the civil rights movement going on, there was people who fought back. There was people who were armed. There was people who carried guns. They wasn't finna turn the other cheeks. Yeah, while everybody else was marching and trying to bring a peaceful protest, there was other people that said, no, we're not gonna do no peaceful protest. We not gonna turn the other cheek. We will fight back. Thank you, Centavo. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Now let's go ahead and skip down to the next information, right? So he married his second wife, Sylvia Robinson, who later adopted the name Amina Baraka. So his wife, he married her in 1966. Now she happened to be a black woman. The two would open a facility in Newark known as Spirit House, a combination playhouse and artist resident. In 1967, he lectured at St. Francisco State University. The year after, he was arrested in Newark for having allegedly carried an illegal weapon and resisting arrest during the 1967 Newark riots. He was subsequently sentenced to 3 years in prison. His poem "Black People," published in the Evergreen Review in December 1967, was read by the judge in court, including the memorable phrase, "All the stores will open if you say the magic word." The magic words are "Up against the wall, motherfucker. This is a stick up." Shortly afterwards, an appeals court reversed the sentence based on his defense by Raymond A. Brown. He later joked that he was charged with holding 2 revolvers and 2 poems. So not long after the 1967 riots, Baraka generated controversy when he went on the radio with a Newark police captain and Anthony Empire, a politician and private business owner, and 3 of them blamed the riots on white-led so-called radical groups and communists and uh, Trotsky persons. The same year, his second book of jazz criticism, Black Music, came out. It was a collection of previous published music journalism, including the seminal Apple Court columns from Downbeat magazine. Around this time, he also formed a record label called Jihad, which produced and issued only 3 LPs, all released in 1968. Sunny Time Now with Sonny Murray, Albert Ayer, Don Cherry, Louis Worrell, Henry Grimes, and Baraka, a black man's future in Sunrise, and Black and Beautiful Soul and Black Madness by the Spirit House Movers, on which Baraka reads his poems or poetry. So in 1967, Baraka visited Maulana Karenga in Los Angeles and became an advocate of his philosophy of Huada, a multifaceted, categorized activist philosophy that produced the Nguzo Saba, Kwanzaa, and an emphasis on African names. It was at this time he adopted the name Imamu Amir Baraka. Imamu is Swahili for a spiritual leader derived from the Arabic word imam. According to Shaw, he dropped the honorific Imamu and eventually changed Amir, which means prince, to Amiri Baraka, which means blessing in the sense of divine favor. All right, so it goes on to talk about his anti-Jewish poems and articles with similar stance at the time of the Nation of Islam. Historian Melanie McAllister points to an example of this writing in the case of Baraka, and in many of the pronouncements of the Nation of Islam, there is a profound difference, both qualitative and quantitative, in the ways that white ethnicity was targeted. For example, in one well-known poem, Black Arts, Baraka made offhand remarks about several groups, commenting in the violent rhetoric that was often typical of him. That ideal poems would knock off dope-selling wops and suggesting that cops should be killed and have their tongues pulled out and sent to Iran. But as Baraka himself later admitted in his piece, I Was an Anti-Semitic, published by the Village Voice on December 20th of 1980, he held a specific animosity for Jews, as was apparent in the different intensity and viciousness of his call in the same poem for dagger poems to stab the slimy bellies of the owner Jews, and for poems that crack steel knuckles in a Jew lady's mouth. Damn. All right. So then it goes on to say that prior to this time, Baraka prided himself on being a forceful advocate of black cultural nationalism. However, by the 1970s, he began finding its racial individuality confining. Baraka's separation from the black arts movement began because he saw certain black writers, capitalitionists, as he called them, countering the black arts movement that he created. He believed that the groundbreakers in the black art movements were doing something that was new, needed, useful, and black, and those who did not want to see a promotion of black expression were appointed to the scene to damage the movement. So he distanced himself from the black nationalism, right, in 1974, and embracing Marxism and Leninism in the context of Mao's third world liberation movement. So he became a lecturer at State University of New York at Stony Brook's Africana Study Department in College of Arts and Sciences at the behest of faculty member Leslie Owens, right? So he also it says they in these articles issue a page one expose of his position in the inaugural issue of the Stony Brook Press of October 25th, 1979, discussed his protests against what he perceived as racism in the Africana Studies Department, as evidenced by a dearth of tenure professors. Shortly thereafter, Baraka took a tenure track assistant professorship at Stony Brook in 1980 to assist the struggling Africana Studies Department. In 1983, he was promoted to associate professor and earned tenure. All right, so there's a lot more information. It says he was arrested and jailed at 8th Street and 5th Avenues in Manhattan. Different accounts emerged around the arrest, yet all sides agreed that Baraka and his wife Amina were in their car arguing over the cost of their children's shoes. The police version of events hold that they were called to the scene after a report of assault in progress. So they maintained that Baraka was striking his wife, and when they moved to intervene, he attacked them as well, whereupon they used the necessary force to seduce him. So Amina's account contrasts with that of police. She held a news conference the day after the arrest, accusing the police of lying. A grand jury dismissed the assault charge, but the resisting arrest charge moved forward. All right. So in the November of 1979, after a 7-day trial, a criminal court jury found Baraka guilty of resisting arrest. So what we see here again, this man was very powerful. You know what I'm saying? We see that he's very powerful, whatnot. And he was really very outspoken, and there was nothing that people could really do about it. He was going to speak his mind. So he also wrote, while serving his sentence, he wrote the autobiography tracing his life from birth to his conversion to socialism. Okay. So right down here, 1980 to 2014, Baraka published an essay, The Village Voice, that was titled Confession of a Former Anti-Semitic. Baraka insists that a Village Voice editor titled it and not himself. In the essay, Baraka went over his life history, including his marriage to Hitty Cohen, who was Jewish. He stated that after the assassination of Malcolm X, he found himself thinking, as a black man married to a white woman, I began to feel estranged from her. How could someone be married to the enemy? He eventually divorced Haiti and left her with their two biracial daughters. In the essay, Baraka went on to say, we also know that much of Bonnet Jewish support of black civil rights organizations was in order to use them. Jews finally are white and suffer from the same kind of white chauvinism that separates a great many whites from black struggle. These Jewish intellectuals have been able to pass over into the promised land of American privilege. Now, that's very deep. That's deep what he said the Jewish people, right? They supported the civil rights because they wanted their piece of the pie and they wanted more privilege. And they got more privilege, and they prosper. As you can see, they prosper a lot in the especially in the entertainment industry, in the media industry, right? They really prosper a lot. A lot of them own so much resources. But they was using the civil rights as a way to get their foot into the game, get themselves at a higher status. So guess what? They benefited more than the black people themselves. So he peeped the game on that. And not saying all Jewish people was like that, but there was those who had that whole intention, that they had those motives of basically get down with the black folks, support what they was doing, just so they can benefit themselves and make themselves look good. So right here, he says in the essay, he also defended his position against Israel, saying Zionism is a form of racism. Near the end of the essay, Baraka stated the following: anti-Semitism is as ugly as ugly an idea and as deadly as white racism and Zionism. For my personal trait, through the wasteland of anti-Semitism, it was momentary and never completely real. I have written only one poem that has definite aspect of anti-Semitism, and I have repudiated as thoroughly as I can. The poem Baraka reference was for Tom Postal, Dead Black Poet, which contained lines including Smile Jew, Dance Jew, Tell Me You Love Me Jew, I got something for you, I got the extermination blues, Jew boys, I got the Hitler syndrome figured. So come for the rent, Jew boys. One day, Jew boys, we all, even my wig wearing mother, gonna put it on you all at once. Damn, that man was powerful. I mean, he was very outspoken. He was very, 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 very outspoken. A very outspoken man. So, let's go down a little bit. Let's skip down. So it says in 2002, scholar Malefi Kinte Asante include Amiri Baraka on his list of 100 greatest African Americans. So in 2003, Baraka's daughter Shani, aged 31, and her lesbian partner Rayshawn Holmes were murdered in the homes of Shani's sisters Wanda Wilson Pasha by Pasha's ex-husband, James Coleman. Prosecutors argued that Coleman shot Shani because she had helped her sister separate from her husband. A New Jersey jury found Coleman, also known as Ibn el Amin Pasha, guilty of murdering Shani Baraka and Rayshawn Holmes, and he was sentenced to 168 years in prison for the 2003 shooting. Wow. So his son, Raz J. Baraka, is a politician and activist in Newark who served as principal of Newark's Central High School as a elected member of the Municipal Council of Newark. Representing the South Ward, Raz J. Baraka became mayor of Newark on July the 1st of 2014. That's interesting. So he passed away on January the 9th of 2014 at Bethel Israel Medical Center in Newark, New Jersey after being hospitalized in the facility intensive care unit for 1 month before his death. The cause of death was not reported initially, but it is mentioned that Baraka had long struggled with diabetes. So later reports indicate that he died from the complication after a recent surgery. Baraka's funeral was held at Newark Symphony Hall on January 18th of 2014. So these are the controversies, right? Let's look at the controversies. Let's see how much more do I got left. What's going on, brother? How you doing, Deshaun? D1 Beats, I see you. What's up? So let's look at the controversy. So what he wrote about white people. The following is from a 1965 essay. He said most white American men are trained to be fags. For this reason, it is no wonder their faces are weak and blank. The average Ofe thinks of the black man as potentially raping every white lady in sight, which is true in the sense that the black man should want to rob the white man of everything he has. But for most whites, the guilt of the robbery is the guilt of rape. That is, they know in their deepest heart that they should be robbed, and the white woman understands that only in the rape subsequence is she likely to get cleanly, viciously popped. Damn. And so he also put in 2009, he was again asked about the quote and placed it in a personal and political perspective. Those quotes are from the Essays in Home, a written book almost 50 years ago. The anger was part of the mindsets created by the first assassination of John Kennedy, followed by the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, followed by the assassination of Malcolm X amidst the lynching and national oppression. A few years later, the assassination of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. What changed my mind was that I became a Marxist after recognizing classes within the black community and the class struggle even after we had worked and struggled to elect the first black mayor of Newark, Kenneth Gibson. So that man was known for his controversy for real and September 11 attacks. So in July of 2002, 10 months after the September 11 attacks on the World Trade Center, Baraka wrote a poem entitled Somebody Blew Up America that was accused of anti-Semitism and met with harsh criticism. The poem is highly critical of racism in America and includes humorous depiction of public figures such as Trent Lott, Clarence Thomas, and Condoleezza Rice. It also contained lines claiming Israel's knowledge of the World Trade Center attack. Who know why 5 Israelis was filming the explosion and cracking their sides at the notion? Who knew the World Trade Center was going to get bombed? Who told 4,000 Israeli workers at the Twin Towers to stay home that day? Why did Sharon stay away? So it says Baraka said that he believed Israel and President George W. Bush had advanced knowledge of the September 11 attacks, citing what he described as information that had been reported in the American and Israeli press. On a Jordanian television, Baraka himself denied the poem is anti-Semitic due to the use of word Israeli rather than Jewish. So it says, however, anti-Semitism watchdog organizations such as the Anti-Defamation League denounced the poem as anti-Semitic. The ADL note noted that the 4,000 worker conspiracy theory had initially referred to Jews writ large, and that Baraka was using a common anti Semitic tactic of replacing references to Jews writ large with references to Israel, and then claiming a common and merely anti Zionist. It says after Palm's publication, then Governor Jim McGreevey tried to remove Baraka from the post of poet laureate of New Jersey, to which he had been appointed following Gerald Stern in July of 2002. McGreevey learned that there was no legal way, according to the law authorizing and defining the position, to remove Baraka. On October 17, 2002, legislation to abolish the post was included in the state Senate and subsequently signed by Governor McGreevey. McGreevey, becoming effective of July the 2nd of 2003. So Baraka ceased being poet laureate when the law became effective. In response to legal action filed by Baraka, the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit ruled that the state officials were immune from such suit, and in 2007, the Supreme Court of the United States refused to hear an appeal of the case. Damn. All right, so as you can see, if you guys want to read any more into this, you can. But it's a lot. It's a lot of things that he has done. So these are his works. So these are his poetry, his drama. So the poetry is the preface to a 20-volume suicide note, Black Magic, Dutchman, the Slave, the Baptism, and the Toilet. That's the drama. The Fishing, the System of Dante's Hell, Tales, and Un Poco Loco. All right, so the nonfiction is Blues People, Home, Social Essays, The Revolutionary Theory, Black Music, Race, Race Essays since 1965, Kawada Studies, Poetry for the Advanced Reggae or Not, The Music Reflection on Jazz, the Autobiography of Leroy Jones, and The Essence of Reparation. So it's a lot more. That's a lot of information, but this man, as you can see, he was very radical, and he was very unapologetic about that. You know what I'm saying? So, but here's the thing: you can't tell people how to express themselves in their own writings in art. You know, yeah, it'll bring controversy. Yeah, it will, cause them not to gain recognition. But that's their art, and that's the way to express. That's the meaning of art, to express oneself. So there's really no limitation. How do you express yourself? What can you say and what you cannot say? You know what I'm saying? At that time, that's how he felt. He felt that shit. We have gone through so much shit with these goddamn white folks. So why not express myself the way I feel in my writings? If I can't do it physically, I can express it in my writings. I read about Amiri in Black Awakening book from Robert Allen, in which described his ideological transformation into a nationalist or a twinner. I found it interesting he left his white wife. Yeah, he left his Jewish wife. Yeah, he left her. He did. And then he had an affair with another woman who happened to be white. Then he married a black woman. Okay. So, I mean, but going back to what I was saying, you can't tell people how to really express themselves when it comes to art, when it comes to their music, or when it really comes to their writings, their poetry. You know what I'm saying? So, by somebody like myself that used to write poems, I won't want somebody to dictate how I can write my poems or what I should say. Now, it may not be agreeable, you know what I mean? But that's just my feelings and that's my thought, which I am entitled to. All right. So, let me show y'all the list of books that he had written over the period of time. Okay, so you can find these on Google. So he got the Blues People, the preface to a 20-volume suicide note, Black Music, okay, SOS Poems, It's Nation Time, Somebody Blew Up America, The System of Dante's Hell, the autobiography. All right. Home, Transbluency, Tales, Somebody Blew Up America. So it's so many books that he has written. Hmm. Conversation with Amiri Baraka, The Essence of Reparation. Right. So these are all his books that was published. Now let's look at his autobiography, what he has to say, real fast. So the autobiography of Leroy Jones. Let's see. Let's go into the introduction. So the introduction said the last writing of this stopped somewhere in 1974 when we had become communists finally. Amina and I. From there has been a whole hurl and whirl of changes and contradiction, unions and struggles until we get into 1996. So the politics is the underlying catalyst, though, and it always is in all of our lives. Were we conscious of it? The fact that I became a communist is not startling to me as much as a stomp down cultural nationalist as I at one time was. I was sincere, but I usually always am. The abject racism and economic super exploitation, denial of rights, and national oppression, and the imperialist overbeing was pressed upon me, even in the eastern city of La La Land, the village. It grew this sense of it, and as I grew intellectually, experimentally, ideologically, whatever, I had seen a pattern, social, aesthetic, and ideological that had worked on me among those who supposed to be whatever of the what it is. And that was funky, that was cold funky, spaced out above the real, which got to be corny and wrong since laying in the cloud of ant anti hip here in the capital of anything goes. How could the who ain't here be anything but not? Then he goes on to talk about then the rush that Malcolm's murder pulled the trigger on what Malcolm was saying, what he was for me was a trigger, a maximal weapon of legitimate resistance to the whole bullshit of the place from its whole ass America to its corny village street. It was the same after all, however you code it in your mind, supremacy and oppression and collaboration and double consciousness. All right. So then it goes down saying that looking back, the organization that I have helped create were absolutely necessary. What they attempted to accomplish still must be done. And that is the real odor of Beelzebub that still won't let me rest. Through CAP, which was basically an alliance of local organizations centered nationally around the principle of Malana Karanga's Kuwada, Swahili for tradition doctrine. At first, armed with this nationalist feud, we did some positive things. So it is my contention that we were revolutionary, albeit saddled with the weight of nationalism, which does not even serve the people. In fact, the U.S., since white nationalism is the dominant social ideology, reactionary black nationalism merely reinforced the segregation and discrimination of the oppressors. I mean, we were anti-imperialist, even a nationalist, which is what should be meant by the often abused term revolutionary nationalists. We were fighting our national oppression as we understood it. That was manifest as white people to us for the obvious reason. That is the nature of big bougie in the U.S., and indeed, the very development of imperialism divides the world into a tiny group of industrialized, mostly European nations, which feed on the rest of the nation of the world in the name of supremacy or progress or straight out as money. So, as you can see here, even in his autobiography, right, he basically just told it like it is. He's basically he's very expressive. So he's very blunt, no sugarcoating, no filter, no nothing. All right, so the copyrights, as you can see down here, 1984, 1986, and 1997. All right. So it said that it was published in 2012, but it was originally published in 1983. Okay. All right. Did he have a couple of books, a couple of his books adapted into movies? Let's look that up, actually, while we here. Let's see. Actually, yes. Yes, he does. Let's see. Let's see here. It looked like he got a lot of them. Hmm. It looks like he got a lot of them that was converted into movies. Hold on. So right here, as we can see down here, you got the Dutchman. Why is we American? The New Arc, Nation Time, Black Theater, the making of a movement. Let's see what else. Let's see, Bulwark. So he was featured in a lot of movies. Yeah, he was featured in a lot of movies, but we see that some of his works was made into a movie as well. But the one that I see is the Dutchman and Nation Time. Yep, yep, he did. So yep, that's the answer to your question right there. You can see that there's some of his books that became movies, and then there's some that he was in the movie or in the documentary films. All right, anyways, that's all I have for today, and I hope you all have a good one. Um, I'll come back later, all right, and talk about some more subjects. Dealing with the pop culture, especially. So I'm going to give my commentaries on certain things and certain issues that's going on within the pop culture. So just be on the lookout for that. But until then, y'all have a good one. Y'all be safe. May peace and power elevation be to all of you. Make sure you guys like my channel, subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell. So shout out to everybody in the chat. Big Cree Money, TK Digital, Vyasa, Centavo, Norman, um, Dejan, and thank you, Centavo, for always making sure that the people subscribe to the channel, like the channel, and share the channel. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. You know, you've been my biggest supporter. Thank you so much. And y'all take it easy on yourself. Until then, I will connect with y'all later. All right, just be on the lookout for that. So peace, be safe. All right, deuces.